3 days after the incident in the training room, Jake Morrison sat before a tribunal of Academy officials and species representatives. The formal hearing chamber was designed to accommodate various alien anatomies, with adjustable seating and translation systems for the dozens of languages spoken within the galactic community. Jake sat in standard humanoid seating, hands folded calmly in his lap as he faced his judges. Commander Theiss presided over the tribunal from an elevated platform. To his left sat Captain Hayes and 2 other human officials who had arrived from Earth specifically for this hearing. To his right were representatives from various alien species, including a Catherian elder who had come to speak for Vextar. This tribunal has reviewed all evidence regarding the incident between Cadet Jake Morrison and Cadet Vextar, Commander Theiss announced. We have examined security footage, medical reports, and testimony from witnesses. Before we render judgment, Cadet Morrison will have the opportunity to speak in his own defense. Jake stood slowly. Thank you, Commander. The charges against you are serious, Commander Theiss continued. Unprovoked assault, excessive force, and conduct unbecoming a cadet. How do you answer these charges? I dispute the characterization of unprovoked assault, Jake said calmly. The evidence clearly shows that Vextar deliberately ignored my surrender signal during a training exercise, causing intentional injury. By Academy regulations, that constitutes assault by the aggressor. The Catherian elder clicked his mandibles angrily. You respond to a minor training injury with crippling violence. This is not proportional response. Jake turned to face the elder directly. With respect, sir, the issue was not the injury itself. The issue was what the injury revealed about Vextar's character and intentions. Someone who deliberately harms a surrendered opponent cannot be trusted in real combat situations. He was a danger to every cadet in this academy. So you appointed yourself judge and executioner? Asked Dr. Kethalon, the crystalline instructor whose species valued logical thinking. I appointed myself protector, Jake replied. My species has a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Vexatar was escalating his harassment campaign. If not stopped, he would have seriously injured someone eventually. Captain Hayes leaned forward. Cadet Morrison, you could have reported the incident through proper channels. And what would have happened? Jake asked. He would have received a reprimand and continued his behavior more carefully. Meanwhile, other cadets would have learned that bullying is acceptable as long as you don't get caught. Commander Theiss consulted his data pad. The medical report on your confrontation with Vextar is disturbing. Dr. Vorth describes your attack as surgically precise, targeting specific anatomical vulnerabilities with expert knowledge. Where did you acquire this expertise? Jake was quiet for a moment. Commander, may I tell you about my home colony? Proceed. Hadley's Rest was a frontier world, Jake began, beautiful but dangerous, with wildlife that could kill an adult human in seconds. My parents were farmers, but everyone on the colony knew basic survival skills. When pirates attacked, the adults fought back while the children hid in the wilderness. Jake's voice remained steady as he described events that clearly still affected him. We lived in caves and ate insects for 6 weeks. We learned to move silently, to hunt, to fight when cornered. Most importantly, we learned to recognize predators and respond appropriately. Are you saying you view Cadet Vextar as a predator? Asked the Etherian representative, whose species valued peaceful conflict resolution. I'm saying humans evolved as both predators and prey, Jake replied. We developed sophisticated threat assessment capabilities because our survival depended on making accurate judgments about danger. Vextar registered as a clear threat not just to me, but to every smaller or weaker cadet in this academy. Dr. Kethlon's crystalline body pulsed with interested light patterns. You speak of evolution and instinct? Are you claiming your response was involuntary? No, sir, Jake said firmly. I made a conscious choice to stop a bully. The methods I used were influenced by evolutionary programming, but the decision was entirely deliberate. The tribunal spent several minutes reviewing additional evidence. During this time, Jake noticed that the viewing gallery was filled with cadets from various species. Some looked at him with fear, others with curiosity, and a few with what appeared to be respect. Commander Theiss called for order. This tribunal has reached a decision. Cadet Morrison, while your methods were extreme, the evidence supports your claim of provocation. Cadet Vexitar did deliberately ignore your surrender signal, constituting assault under Academy regulations. The Catherian elder rose angrily. This is unacceptable. You excuse disproportionate violence. On the contrary, Commander Theiss replied coolly, we are acknowledging that different species have different threat responses. Our failure was in not understanding human psychology well enough to predict this outcome. Jake felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. What does this mean for my status at the Academy? You will serve 30 days of restricted privileges and undergo psychological evaluation, Commander Theiss announced. Additionally, you will participate in a new program designed to help Academy staff better understand human behavioral patterns. Captain Hayes stood. Commander, I request permission to oversee this program personally. Granted. This tribunal is adjourned. Over the following weeks, Jake found his status at the Academy had changed dramatically. The incident with Vextar had created ripple effects throughout the cadet population. Alien cadets who had previously dismissed humans as weak now gave them considerably more space and respect. Some viewed this change with fear, others with grudging admiration. Jake's fellow human cadets had mixed reactions to his actions. Sam Collins supported him completely, arguing that someone needed to stand up to the bullying that had been escalating for weeks. Alex Rivera was more conflicted, worried that Jake's violence would reflect badly on all humans. Ben Clark avoided Jake entirely, clearly frightened by what he had witnessed. The most surprising change came from Vextar himself. The Catherian had been transferred to a rehabilitation facility to recover from his injuries, but before leaving he requested a meeting with Jake. I underestimated your species, Vextar said through the communication system from his medical bed. His primary arm was still immobilized, but his condition had stabilized. I assumed that because humans lack natural weapons, you were incapable of serious violence. Most humans are incapable of serious violence, Jake replied honestly. Civilization teaches us to resolve conflicts through words and laws and compromise. But when those methods fail, we have other options. I can see that, Vextar said, flexing his uninjured arms carefully. My species respects strength above all else. I was wrong to think humans were weak just because your strength is hidden. Jake studied the alien's face, looking for signs of deception or continued hostility. Instead, he saw something like genuine respect. Are we going to have problems if you return to the Academy? No, Vexitar said firmly. Among my people, you have proven your worth in combat. I will not challenge you again, and I will ensure others understand the lesson you taught. This conversation was part of Captain Hayes's new program, which involved extensive interviews with Jake about human psychology, threat assessment, and combat responses. The information gathered was used to develop new training protocols for Academy staff and cadets. The fascinating thing, Captain Hayes explained to Commander Thist during one of their regular briefings, is that Jake's response was entirely predictable if you understand human evolutionary history. We're a species that survived by being more dangerous than everything else on our planet. That capacity for violence is still there, just suppressed by social conditioning. Are all humans capable of this level of aggression? Commander Theiss asked. Under the right circumstances, probably, Captain Hayes admitted. The difference is in trigger conditions. Most humans would never reach Jake's activation threshold in a civilized environment. But Jake grew up on a frontier world and survived a traumatic attack. His threat assessment protocols are calibrated differently. Commander Theiss made notes on his datapad. This has implications for human integration into galactic society. Both positive and negative, Captain Hayes agreed. On one hand, humans can be valuable allies because we're willing to fight when necessary. On the other hand, we need to be careful about putting humans in situations where they feel cornered or threatened. 3 months after the incident, Jake was walking through the academy corridors when he encountered a group of younger cadets surrounding a small Etherian student. The situation looked familiar. Larger, stronger beings intimidating someone smaller and weaker. Jake approached the group calmly. Is there a problem here? The lead cadet, a Saurian with impressive physical size, turned to face Jake. Recognition flashed in his reptilian eyes. No problem, Morrison. Just helping this little one understand Academy hierarchy. I see, Jake said pleasantly. And what exactly are you teaching? The Saurian cadet's confidence wavered slightly. Everyone at the Academy knew the story of what had happened to Vextar. Just basic respect for stronger species. The medical bay of Zenith Academy was designed to handle injuries from 23 different species. But Dr. Vorth had never seen anything quite like what happened between Jake Morrison and Vextar. The Catherian lay on one medical table, his primary arm immobilized in a regeneration field while pain medications flowed through his system. On another table, Jake sat quietly while a different medic examined his broken finger. Remarkable, Dr. Vorth murmured as he studied the scans of Vextar's injuries. Multiple fractures in precise locations, damage to specific nerve clusters, partial dislocation of 3 joints. This was not random violence. Security Chief Grath stood nearby, his massive reptilian form casting shadows across the medical equipment. Are you saying this was planned? I'm saying whoever did this understood Catherian anatomy better than most doctors, Dr. Vorth replied. These injuries were inflicted with surgical precision. Across the room, Jake appeared to be cooperating, fully with his medical examination. His vital signs were normal, his demeanor calm and responsive. If not for the unconscious Catherian nearby, no one would suspect he had just been involved in a violent confrontation. Captain Hayes entered the medical bay, followed by Commander Theiss and 2 other senior officers. The Academy's director looked grim as he surveyed the scene. Report, Commander Theiss ordered. Security Chief Grath consulted his datapad. According to witnesses, Cadet Morrison approached Cadet Vexitar during training exercises. Words were exchanged, then Morrison attacked without warning. The fight lasted approximately 45 seconds before Morrison disabled his opponent. And Morrison's version of events? He claims it was a training accident, Captain Hayes said carefully. Same as the broken finger incident earlier. Commander Theiss walked over to Jake's medical table. The human looked up at him with the same respectful attention he had shown since arriving at the academy. "Cadet Morrison, you understand the seriousness of these charges?" "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Unprovoked assault on a fellow cadet is grounds for immediate dismissal and criminal prosecution." Commander Theiss continued. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Sir, I'm not sure it was unprovoked." "Explain." "Vexitar deliberately ignored my surrender signal during the earlier exercise," Jake said calmly. "He broke my finger intentionally, then boasted about teaching weaker species to respect their betters. That seemed like a threat to me and the other human cadets." Security Chief Grath made a dismissive sound. "So you attacked him for words?" "No, sir," Jake said. "I attacked him because he demonstrated that he was willing to hurt people who couldn't defend themselves. That makes him dangerous to everyone here, not just humans." Commander Theiss studied Jake carefully. "You speak as if you calculated this response." "I did, sir." The admission created silence in the medical bay. Even the injured Vexitar seemed to stir slightly, though he remained unconscious. "You plan to assault Cadet Vexitar?" Commander Theiss asked. "No, sir," Jake said. "I plan to stop him from hurting anyone else." The method was improvised. Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Commander, I request permission to speak with Cadet Morrison privately." Commander Theiss nodded. "Granted. But he remains in custody pending investigation." After the senior officers left, Captain Hayes sat beside Jake's medical table. "Talk to me, Morrison. What really happened in there?" Jake flexed his healing finger, testing the regeneration field's progress. "I got angry, ma'am." "Angry enough to put a Catherian warrior in intensive care?" Apparently. Captain Hayes leaned back in her chair. "Jake, I've been a soldier for 20 years. I've seen humans in combat, under stress, pushed to their limits. What I saw in that training room was something else entirely." Jake met her eyes. "What did you see?" "I saw a predator," she said quietly. "For about 3 minutes. You stopped being a civilized human being and became something much older and more dangerous. Where did that come from?" Jake was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My home colony was attacked by pirates when I was 14. They killed my parents and most of the other adults. The survivors had to hide in the wilderness for 6 weeks until colonial defense arrived. That must have been traumatic." "It was educational," Jake said. "I learned that civilization is just a thin layer over something much more primitive. I learned that when that layer gets stripped away, what's underneath is what kept our species alive for millions of years." Captain Hayes nodded slowly. "And today, Vexitar stripped away that layer." "He broke the rules," Jake said simply. "He hurt someone who had surrendered, then bragged about it. In the wilderness, that kind of behavior gets you killed, because it means you can't be trusted when survival is at stake. But we're not in the wilderness, Jake. We're in a military academy with rules and procedures and disciplinary systems." Jake looked at her with something like pity. "Are we? Because from where I sit, it looks like Vexitar had been breaking rules for weeks and no one stopped him. It looks like the disciplinary system here protects bullies as long as they're strong enough." Before Captain Hayes could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the medical bay. Emergency lights flashed as Dr. Vorth rushed to Vexitar's table. "He's going into shock," the doctor announced. "His system is rejecting the regeneration treatment." Medical personnel swarmed around the Catherian's table, working frantically to stabilize his condition. Jake watched with clinical interest, showing no visible emotion as the alien who had tormented him fought for his life. "Doesn't that bother you?" Captain Hayes asked quietly. "Should it?" Jake replied. "He made his choice when he decided to hurt someone weaker than himself. I made mine when I decided to stop him." "And if he dies?" Jake considered this. "Then other bullies will think twice before breaking someone's finger for entertainment." The coldness in Jake's voice sent a chill through Captain Hayes. This was not the eager young cadet who had arrived at the academy weeks ago. Something fundamental had changed in Jake Morrison, something that might never change back. Hours later, Jake sat alone in a holding cell while academy officials reviewed security footage and witness statements. Through the transparent walls, he could see other cadets walking past in the corridor. Some stared at him with fear, others with what might have been respect. A few human cadets gave him subtle nods of approval. His roommate Quill appeared outside the cell, carrying a data pad and looking troubled. "They're letting me visit for a few minutes," the Etherian said through the communication system. "How's Vextar?" Jake asked. "Stable but critical," Quill replied. "The doctors think he'll survive, but his arm may never fully heal. He'll probably be discharged from the academy." Jake nodded as if this was expected news. "Good. Good." Quill looked shocked. "Jake, you nearly killed him." "I disabled a threat," Jake corrected. "If I had wanted to kill him, he'd be dead." The casual certainty in Jake's voice made Quill step back from the cell wall. "What happened to you? A few hours ago, you were my friend. Someone who helped me with tactical studies and shared stories about Earth. Now you sound like..." "Like what?" "Like a predator who's tasted blood and wants more." Jake smiled, and the expression was not entirely human. "Maybe that's what I always was, Quill. Maybe civilization just taught me to hide it better." Down the corridor, Security Chief Grath was meeting with Commander Theiss and other senior officers. Through enhanced hearing that came with his adrenaline-heightened state, Jake could catch fragments of their conversation. Unprecedented violence from a human cadet. Need to consider the implications for the program. Other species are requesting increased security. Maybe we underestimated their potential for aggression. Jake leaned back against the cell wall and closed his eyes. Part of him felt guilty about what had happened, worried about the consequences for himself and the other human cadets. But a larger part felt satisfied in a way he had never experienced before. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The predator was awake now, and it was not going back to sleep. Jake Morrison sat perfectly still as the academy medic wrapped his broken finger in a healing field generator. The device hummed softly against his skin, accelerating bone repair and reducing pain. Around him, the Advanced Combat Techniques class had resumed normal training, but Jake could feel eyes watching him from across the room. "The break is clean," said Dr. Vorth, a amphibian medic whose species was known for their healing abilities. "The generator will have you back to full function in 2 days. You were fortunate." "Yeah," Jake said quietly. "Fortunate." Captain Hayes knelt beside the medical station. "Morrison, I need to ask what happened during that exercise." Jake looked at her steadily. "Training accident, ma'am. Like Vextar said." Captain Hayes studied his face. She had been a soldier long enough to recognize when someone was not telling the complete truth. "Are you certain that's how you want to report this?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "Very well. Report to medical tomorrow for a progress check." You're excused from physical training until cleared. Jake stood carefully, cradling his injured hand. The healing field generator made the finger feel strange, like it belonged to someone else. He started toward the exit, planning to return to his dormitory and think about what had just happened. Across the training room, Vextar was demonstrating a submission technique to a group of younger cadets. His forearms moved with fluid precision as he showed them how to apply maximum pressure without causing permanent damage. The key, he was saying in his loud, confident voice, is knowing exactly how much force your opponent can handle. Jake stopped walking. Something had changed in the last few minutes, something fundamental. The pain in his finger was not the problem. Jake had broken bones before during his rough childhood on the frontier colony. Pain was temporary and manageable. What was not manageable was the realization that Vexatar had deliberately ignored his surrender signal, had intentionally caused injury during a training exercise, and was now boasting about his technique to impressionable young cadets. Sometimes, Vextar continued, apparently unaware that Jake had stopped near the exit, you must teach weaker species to respect their betters. A small lesson in pain prevents larger problems later. Jake felt something shift deep in his brain, like a door opening that had been locked his entire life. His breathing changed, becoming deeper and more controlled. His heart rate slowed instead of speeding up. The pain in his finger faded to distant background noise. He turned around and walked back toward where Vextar was teaching. Captain Hayes noticed the change immediately. Jake's posture was different, his movement more predatory. She had seen this before in combat veterans, the moment when training gave way to something older and more dangerous. "Morrison!" she called sharply. Jake did not respond. His attention was completely focused on Vextar, who was still demonstrating joint manipulation techniques. The Catherian had not noticed Jake's approach yet, too engaged in showing off his superior knowledge to the circle of younger cadets. The human species, Vexatar was saying, lacks natural weapons and armor. They depend on tools and clever thinking because they are physically weak. When those advantages are removed, they have nothing left. "Is that what you think?" Jake asked quietly. Vexatar turned, his 4 eyes widening slightly when he saw Jake standing just outside the circle of cadets. There was something in the human's expression that the Catherian had not seen before, something that made his combat instincts whisper warnings. "I think you should be in medical," Vextar said, trying to maintain his confident tone. "Getting that finger properly treated." "My finger is fine," Jake said, flexing the injured digit without visible discomfort. "I wanted to thank you for the lesson." The training room was growing quieter as other cadets sensed the tension building between the human and the Catherian. Captain Hayes was moving toward them, but she was on the far side of the room and would need several seconds to reach them. "You're welcome," Vextar said cautiously. "Perhaps next time you'll tap out sooner." "Oh, I learned something much more important than that," Jake said, stepping closer. "I learned that you're the kind of person who hurts others when they can't fight back. I learned that you think being strong gives you the right to break weaker people just because you can." Vexatar's mandibles clicked nervously. The human was standing too close, well within striking distance, and something about his posture suggested he was no longer the careful, controlled cadet they had been dealing with for weeks. "And I learned," Jake continued in the same quiet voice, "that I don't like people like that very much." What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Jake moved with a speed and fluidity that shocked everyone watching. There was no warning, no telegraphed attack, no moment of preparation. One instant he was standing calmly, the next he was inside Vextar's guard, with his hands locked around the Catherian's primary right arm. Vextar was nearly 7 feet tall and outweighed Jake by more than 100 pounds. His species had evolved as apex predators with natural armor and redundant limbs. He had trained in combat from childhood and had never lost a fight to any being smaller than himself. None of that mattered. Jake's attack was not random violence. Every movement was precise and calculated, targeting specific points on Catherian anatomy with surgical accuracy. He used Vexatar's size against him, redirecting the alien's defensive movements into positions that created leverage disadvantages. When Vextar tried to grab Jake with his secondary arms, Jake was already moving, flowing around the Catherian's defenses like water around stone. The watching cadets scrambled backward as the two fighters crashed into training equipment. Vextar was strong enough to lift small vehicles, but his strength was useless when he could not get a solid grip on his opponent. Jake seemed to anticipate every move, every counterattack, every desperate attempt to use superior reach and power. Captain Hayes was shouting for security and trying to reach them, but the fight was moving too fast and covering too much ground. Other instructors were converging on their position, but they were seconds away, and the confrontation was happening in real time. Vextar managed to land one solid blow with his secondary left arm, a strike that should have sent Jake flying across the room. Instead, Jake absorbed the impact and used it to get closer, wrapping himself around the Catherian's arm like a python. Vexatar tried to shake him off, then tried to slam him into the wall, but Jake held on with the kind of grip that suggested he would rather be torn apart than let go. The end came when Vextar overextended himself, trying to grab Jake with his primary left arm. Jake shifted his weight and applied leverage in a way that put tremendous stress on the Catherian's elbow joint. For a moment, Vextar's superior strength held against the mechanical disadvantage Jake had created. Then something snapped. Vextar's scream was unlike anything the assembled cadets had ever heard. It was a sound of genuine agony mixed with disbelief, the cry of a predator who had suddenly become prey. His primary arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken in multiple places. Jake released his grip and stepped back, breathing normally. The dangerous light in his eyes faded as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by his usual calm expression. He looked down at Vextar, who was curled on the floor, clutching his ruined arm. "I guess we both learned something today," Jake said quietly. Security. Personnel flooded into the training room, weapons drawn and shouting orders. Jake raised his hands and allowed himself to be restrained without resistance. Captain Hayes reached them a moment later, followed by medical teams who immediately began treating Vextar's injuries. "What happened here?" demanded Security Chief. Grath, a massive reptilian whose species was known for their enforcement capabilities. Captain Hayes looked at Jake, who was standing calmly despite being surrounded by armed guards. "Training accident," she said finally. "Get them both to medical immediately." As Jake was led away, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished wall panel. For just a moment he did not recognize the person looking back at him. There was something in those eyes that had not been there before, something ancient and patient and completely without mercy. He wondered if this was what his ancestors had looked like when they hunted across the African plains, when survival meant being more dangerous than everything else in the world. He wondered if this was what had made humans the dominant species on Earth, long before they learned to build spaceships and make friends with aliens. Most of all, he wondered if he could put that thing back to sleep, or if breaking Vextar's arm had awakened something that could never be contained again. The medical bay doors closed behind him, and Jake Morrison disappeared into a world of questions he was not sure he wanted answered. The next few weeks at Zenith Academy proved to be both exciting and frustrating for Jake Morrison. The classes were unlike anything he had experienced before, covering everything from alien psychology to advanced weapons systems to zero-gravity combat. Jake found himself genuinely enjoying the academic challenges, especially the tactical planning courses where cadets had to solve complex military problems. It was during one of these tactical exercises that Jake first surprised his instructors. The scenario involved rescuing hostages from a heavily defended space station. Most alien cadets approached the problem with direct assault tactics, using their natural advantages in strength or speed. Jake studied the problem for several minutes, then proposed something completely different. "What if we don't attack the station at all?" Jake suggested during the group discussion. "What if we convince them to come to us?" Instructor Kethalon, a crystalline being whose species communicated through light patterns, flickered with interest. "Explain your reasoning, Cadet Morrison." Jake stood and pointed to the holographic display. "The defenders are expecting an assault. They've positioned themselves to repel boarders and protect the hostages. But they need supplies. If we intercept their supply ships and offer to trade those supplies for the hostages, we avoid a fight entirely and everyone goes home alive." The classroom fell silent. Vextar made a dismissive clicking sound. "Cowards thinking," he announced. "Warriors take what they want. They don't beg for it. Sometimes the smart choice and the brave choice are different things," Jake replied calmly. Instructor Kethalon's body pulsed with approving light. "Cadet Morrison demonstrates lateral thinking. In real combat, the goal is mission success, not personal glory. His solution achieves the objective with minimal casualties." This praise did not make Jake popular with his alien classmates. After class, Vextar cornered Jake in the corridor. "You make the rest of us look bad with your soft thinking," the Catherian said, his four arms crossed menacingly. "Perhaps you need to learn your place." "My place is here, same as yours," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. He could feel that dangerous feeling rising again, the one that made his heart beat faster and his muscles tense. "I'm not trying to make anyone look bad. I'm just trying to learn." "Learn this," Vextar said, stepping closer. "Weakness is not tolerated here. Your clever words won't save you when real fighting starts." Sam Collins appeared beside Jake before the confrontation could escalate. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her hand resting casually on her practice weapon. Vextar looked at both humans with what might have been amusement. "Two soft mammals," he said. "How frightening." But he stepped back and walked away, his followers trailing behind him. "Thanks," Jake said to Sam. "Don't mention it," she replied. "But he's not going to let this go. Catherians see backing down as weakness and standing up to them as insult. Either way, you lose." Jake learned this lesson again during physical training. The Academy's combat courses were designed to test cadets across multiple scenarios, from hand-to-hand fighting to weapon usage to tactical coordination. Jake was not the strongest or fastest cadet, but he was adaptable and persistent. While aliens with natural advantages dominated single combat exercises, Jake excelled in complex scenarios that required thinking as well as fighting. During a Capture the Flag exercise in the Academy's urban warfare training ground, Jake's team was outnumbered and outgunned. The opposing team included Vextar and several other naturally powerful aliens. Jake spent the first few minutes studying their opponent's movements from cover. "They're using brute force tactics," Jake told his teammates, which included Sam, Quill the Etherian, and the aquatic delphine named Alex Rivera. They expect us to do the same thing and lose. What do you suggest? Sam asked. Because if this turns into a straight fight, we're done. Jake pointed to the industrial training area around them. We don't fight them directly. We make them come to us on our terms. He outlined a plan that involved using the environment itself as a weapon, creating distractions and misdirection while slowly wearing down the opposing team. The plan worked perfectly. While Vextar's team charged forward expecting easy victories, Jake's team used hit-and-run tactics, environmental hazards, and coordinated strikes to neutralize opponents one by one. When the exercise ended, Jake's smaller team had won decisively. Instructor Theis himself observed the final moments. "Impressive tactical adaptation, Cadet Morrison," the reptilian commander said. "Your species may lack natural weapons, but you demonstrate the ability to think beyond obvious solutions." This victory made Jake's situation worse instead of better. Vextar was humiliated by losing to what he considered inferior beings, and other alien cadets began to view Jake as a threat to the natural order they expected to maintain. Jake found his meals frequently interrupted by accidents that spilled food on him. His equipment was mysteriously moved or damaged. Other cadets would bump into him in corridors hard enough to knock him down. Jake endured these petty harassments without complaint, following Captain Hayes's advice to stay smart and avoid stupid confrontations. But the pressure was building, and Jake could feel his patience wearing thin. The dangerous feeling that lived somewhere deep in his mind was getting stronger, and sometimes Jake caught himself fantasizing about what he would do if he stopped holding back. His roommate Quill noticed the change. "You seem troubled, my friend," the Etherian said one evening as Jake stared at the ceiling instead of sleeping. "Just adjusting to academy life," Jake replied. "The Catherians are testing you," Quill said quietly. "They do this to anyone they see as a challenge to their dominance. Most species either submit or fight back directly. Both responses confirm their beliefs about natural hierarchy." "What would you suggest?" Jake asked. "For my species, we would seek harmony through understanding," Quill said. "But I think humans are different. You have something sleeping in you that the others don't recognize. Be careful not to wake it before you're ready." This warning proved prophetic during the next week's Advanced Combat Techniques class. Captain Hayes was teaching joint manipulation and submission holds, techniques designed to disable opponents without permanent injury. The exercises required cadets to pair up and practice on each other, switching between attacker and defender roles. Jake found himself paired with a Delphine cadet named Zephlon, one of the few aliens who had shown him any friendliness. They worked through the exercises carefully, making sure not to actually hurt each other. Jake was learning to adapt human anatomy to techniques designed for other species when Captain Hayes called for partners to switch. "Morrison," Vextar called, out before anyone else could claim Jake as a partner. "You're with me." Captain Hayes looked uncertain. "Vextar, these techniques can be dangerous when there's a significant size difference." "We're all soldiers here," Vextar said smoothly. "Morrison can handle a little rough training, can't you, human?" Jake felt all eyes on him. To refuse would confirm every stereotype about human weakness. To accept meant putting himself in Vextar's hands, literally. "Sure," Jake said, walking over to where the Catherian waited. The first few exercises went normally. Vexitar was stronger but followed the prescribed techniques without adding extra force. Jake began to relax, thinking maybe the alien was capable of professionalism after all. They practiced arm bars, leg locks, and pressure point holds, with Jake tapping out appropriately when caught in submission positions. "Your turn to be the attacker," Vextar said, as they reset for the final exercise. Jake attempted a joint lock. That should have been simple against the Catherian's anatomy. But Vextar easily countered and trapped Jake in a submission hold that put tremendous pressure on his shoulder and wrist. Jake immediately tapped the mat, the universal signal for surrender. Vextar did not release the hold. "I said tap," Jake said, his voice strained as the pressure increased. "I heard you," Vextar replied quietly, so only Jake could hear. "But I don't think you really mean it." Jake tapped again, harder this time. Other cadets were watching now, sensing something was wrong. Captain Hayes started moving toward them, but Vextar adjusted his grip, and Jake felt something in his finger give way. The snap was audible across the training room. Jake's vision went white for a moment as pain shot up his arm. When it cleared, he found himself sitting on the mat with Captain Hayes kneeling beside him and Vextar standing over them both with an expression of mock concern. "Sorry about that," Vextar said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Training. Accidents happen. Maybe next time you'll tap out sooner." Jake looked down at his hand. His ring finger was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. The pain was intense, but manageable. What was not manageable was the feeling rising from somewhere deep in his brain, something primitive and violent that Jake had spent his entire life keeping locked away. "It's okay," Jake said calmly, accepting Captain Hayes's help to stand. "Just an accident." But as medical personnel arrived to treat his injury, Jake kept his eyes on Vextar, and something cold and patient in those eyes made the Catherian's mandibles click nervously for the first time since Jake had known him. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive towers of Zenith Military Academy. The buildings stretched high into the orange sky of Callus Prime, their metal surfaces gleaming under the twin suns. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that he was here, his stomach felt tight with nerves. The academy was huge and filled with aliens Jake had only seen in videos before. A group of tall blue beings with tentacles instead of arms walked past him, speaking in musical tones. Near the entrance, several reptilian creatures with scales that shifted colors stood in formation. Jake had studied 23 different alien species before coming here, but seeing them in person was completely different. He picked up his single bag and walked toward the main building. Other new cadets moved in the same direction, and Jake noticed he was one of the smallest beings there. Most of the aliens were taller, stronger, or had natural weapons like claws or spikes. Jake wondered if coming here had been a mistake. A loud voice boomed across the courtyard. "All new cadets report to Assembly Hall 7 immediately." Jake followed the crowd, trying not to stare at the incredible diversity around him. Some aliens had 4 arms, others had wings, and a few seemed to float instead of walking. Inside the assembly hall, Jake found a seat near the back. The chairs were designed to fit different body types, and Jake had to adjust his to match human proportions. Around him, cadets chatted in various languages, some using sounds Jake could not even identify as speech. A tall reptilian being with golden scales stepped onto the stage. "I am Commander Thys, director of this academy," the creature said in perfect standard galactic. "You are here because your species believes you have potential. Some of you will prove them right. Others will fail and return home in shame." Jake listened as Commander Thys explained the academy rules. Students would be ranked by performance in combat, tactics, leadership, and academic studies. The weak would serve the strong as nature intended. Those who could not adapt would be sent away. Jake felt his confidence drop with each word. Humans, Commander Thiss continued, looking directly at Jake's section, are new to this galaxy. We have accepted 12 of your kind as an experiment. Do not disappoint us. Jake felt every alien eye turn toward the small group of humans scattered throughout the hall. He recognized a few faces from the transport, but had not spoken to any of them yet. They all looked as nervous as he felt. After the assembly, cadets were divided into training groups. Jake found himself assigned to Group 7 with 30 other beings. Only one other human was in his group, a girl named Sam Collins, who looked like she could handle herself in a fight. The rest were various alien species, including several that Jake recognized as naturally aggressive. The largest being in the group was Vextar, a Catherian with 4 arms and a body covered in hard black shell. Catherians were known for their military discipline and considered themselves the finest warriors in the galaxy. Vextar stood nearly 7 feet tall and moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Soft mammals, Vextar said, looking at Jake and Sam. They put soft mammals in our group. Several other aliens made sounds that Jake assumed were laughter. Sam stepped forward. We're here same as you, she said calmly. We earned our spots. Vextar tilted his head, studying Sam like she was an interesting insect. Earned? Your species has been in space for what, 50 years? My people have been warriors for 10,000. He turned to Jake. What about you, small one? What makes you think you belong here? Jake met Vextar's 4 eyes. I guess we'll find out, he said simply. This seemed to amuse Vextar. Yes, we will. The group was led to their dormitory building by Captain Lisa Hayes, one of the few human instructors at the academy. She was a veteran of the Colonial Defense Corps and carried herself like someone who had seen real combat. As they walked, she quietly spoke to the human cadets. Listen carefully, she said in a low voice. Most of these species judge others by physical strength and natural weapons. They think humans are weak because we don't have claws or armor or poison. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely right either. Stay smart, stay together, and don't let them push you into doing something stupid. Jake's room was small but comfortable, designed for humanoid species. His roommate was a peaceful being called Quill, who belonged to a species called Etherians. Quill was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. Etherians were known for their intelligence and artistic abilities, not for fighting. First, time away from your home world? Quill asked as Jake unpacked his few belongings. Yes, Jake replied. You? 3rd year here, Quill said. I should warn you, the Catherians like to test new cadets, especially those they see as weak. Be careful around Vextar. That evening, all cadets gathered in the main dining hall. The food was designed to meet the nutritional needs of various species, and Jake found options that were safe for humans to eat. He sat with Sam and 2 other human cadets, Alex Rivera and Ben Clark. Did you see the size of some of these beings? Ben whispered. That reptilian guy could probably bite my head off. The Saurians are actually pretty reasonable, Alex said. It's the Catherians you need to watch. They believe might makes right, and they think we're at the bottom of the food chain. As if summoned by their conversation, Vextar approached their table. Several other aliens followed him, forming a loose circle around the humans. The dining hall grew quieter as other cadets sensed potential conflict. I have been thinking about our soft mammal friends, Vextar announced loudly enough for Nearby tables to hear? Perhaps they should sit at the children's table where they belong. Jake continued eating, not looking up. We're fine here, thanks. Are you? Vextar leaned closer. Because from where I stand, you look like prey animals who wandered into the wrong territory. Sam started to rise, but Jake gently touched her arm. It's okay, he said quietly. Then he looked up at Vextar. You're probably right about the prey animal thing. Humans aren't the biggest or strongest species. But we didn't get to where we are by giving up every time someone bigger showed up. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what Jake assumed was amusement. Brave words from someone I could break with one arm. Maybe, Jake agreed. But then you'd be the kind of person who breaks someone smaller just because you can. And that says more about you than it does about me. The Catherian stared at Jake for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. Finally, he straightened up. We will see what kind of person you are when the real testing begins, human. As Vextar and his followers moved away, Jake realized his hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from something else, something that felt like anger mixed with excitement. He had felt this way before, during fights with bullies back on the colony world where he grew up. It was a dangerous feeling, and Jake worked to push it down. Nice job not backing down, Sam said quietly. Yeah, well, backing down never solved anything, Jake replied. But as he watched Vextar across the dining hall, he wondered if standing up had just made things worse. He had come to the academy to prove humans belonged among the galactic community. Now he was worried he might have to fight for that right sooner than expected. The first day at Zenith Academy was over, but Jake had a feeling the real challenges were just beginning.